Welcome to Make and Decorate, a podcast for makers who love to sew, quilt, knit, and decorate. Today I have a returning guest, Jenni Grover, wellness coach for makers. Welcome back, Jenni. I am really happy to chat with you again. It's been a long while since you were first on the show, so hello, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me again. You know, I love to be on the show.
Yes, and I love talking with you. I think we would love to chat with everybody so much more often in our busy lives, but
Oh yeah. I
oh,
mean, and I haven't been to Quilt Guild meetings lately because of some stuff we'll talk about. And I haven't, so I've been missing your face. So it's good to see you too.
you too. So, okay, since it has been a while, because Jenni has been on the show before, but it's been well over a year. And so, for people who haven't heard your story, just maybe recap a bit about your story of health and creative hobbies and wellness
Sure. Thanks. Yeah.
into
Well,
what you're
so,
doing today. Yeah.
hmm well, so I've always been a creative person since I was a little kid. I mean, I think all people are very creative when they're kids. Like, I think we're born with that innate creative energy. And luckily, I kept nurturing it, and other people helped me nurture it. So even into young adulthood, I was making zines as a hobby and doing weird makeup and going to weird dance parties and just always finding ways to be creative. And then in my mid 20s, I got sick with a bunch of different chronic health things. So I got diagnosed within about a year with fibromyalgia, anxiety, depression, asthma, Raynaud's phenomenon, which is like a circulatory disease. It was just a bunch of things all at the same time. And it just utterly changed my life. I went from being a person who could go running and swim, laps for 45 minutes without stopping and dancing on tables at parties and stuff to like not being able to walk more than a couple blocks at a time. Just really struggling to be able to function. So, um, it shifted my career and it shifted my work. So after a few years of like getting more comfortable with all these illnesses and managing them, getting a lot of help with that, I started doing advocacy work under the name ChronicBabe. And I tried to make it fun and silly, but also inspiring and nurturing, and try to teach other young women like me how to live well in spite of illness. Some people can remember a time when the blogging was new. So that's when I started
hmm
that work, was like blogging was a new thing. And for a woman in her 20s to be and early 30s to be writing online about chronic health experiences was incredibly rare. Like, I knew all the people doing it and I could count them on one hand. So that was a really giant creative healing act for me to create that work to help others, but it was a very creative process for me to design a website and a newsletter and start giving talks and things like that. Um, I did that work for 16 years and I loved it so much. And I also got really burnt out because living in a body with chronic illness and then working on things about chronic illness. And then naturally, so many of my friends have chronic illness and we would talk about it when we would hang out. And it was like my whole world was about illness. And I hit a wall. I didn't want my whole world to be about illness anymore. So I made a decision in 2019 to shift careers and to start focusing, it was training and then focusing on coaching, and with a wellness approach, which doesn't mean ignoring illness. And it might seem like semantics to some people, but I shifted my self belief from a person who I've always thought of myself as a sick person, and through a lot of therapy work and um, kind of working on myself, started to think of myself as a well person who had happened to have a bunch of stuff going on, you know. It was this mindset shift for me that had me start to feel like I had more options, um, that I was coming at it from a more positive angle, certainly not ignoring all the negative stuff, but it was just a mindset shift for me that really, really, really helped. And so then I began coaching and I decided to focus on makers because y'all are my people. And so doing wellness coaching, teaching people how to feel as well as possible, physically, mentally, socially, creatively, spiritually, um, to me means being a well-rounded creative person. And that's what I try to be in my life, and being able to bring that work to other people.
Hmm.
It's like I get coached every time I coach someone. Every
Yeah.
time I teach a class, I'm taking the class with you. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah.
So
uh,
that's like the quick and dirty of my journey
Yeah.
from
Yeah, no, it's great, and it's like you said, 16 plus years ago, it really wasn't like
yeah,
uh, out there as a thing. I mean, even like
yeah.
anxieties and depression and stuff like that was still sort of like you kept it close to the vest because
Oh,
people think
yes.
that you're flawed and
Oh,
weird
yeah.
in
I
some
mean,
way.
yeah, and actually, so like I started that work in 2004. So it's been
Hmm.
20 years now since I started that work, and
Yeah.
even was envisioning it in 2003. So I mean, I really, I mean, and that was around the time that was shortly after I had left my last full-time job and started my own company. And I
Mm-hmm.
was fearful to some degree that potential clients or clients would see me talking about that I have chronic illness, that I have anxiety, that I have depression, and not want to hire me. And it was a
Mm-hmm.
really big leap of faith for me to say, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to talk about this publicly. It's going to help people. And if a client doesn't want to work with me because I have anxiety, their loss. Like that's how I felt. I,
Hmm.
I was a lot younger. I felt more courageous, maybe. I don't know. I'm pretty courageous now, but um, I just was like, oh, whatever, screw them. I mean, definitely was like, not. I knew it was not going to be a problem, but it's uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable at first, and definitely I had people say to me, like the most hurtful thing I think someone said, a family member said to me, "You're attention seeking." Like you're
Mm.
talking about your stuff publicly, all you want is attention. And I was like, of course I want attention. I'm trying to advocate for people whose voices are constantly silenced. So, yes, you're
Hmm.
right. I am attention
You're
seeking.
calling attention to these issues that people deal
Yes.
with on a daily basis and are
Yeah.
feeling what you're feeling
Yeah. Yeah.
without a validation and being heard.
Yeah.
And when I first
Absolutely.
met you, yeah, I first met you at least 10, 12 years ago, right? It's been a
I think it
while.
was about 10 years ago. Yeah.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's right when you just were publishing your book, Chronic Babe. And
Yeah. That's right.
uh, I had already been going through, like, I mean, your illness came upon you so young in your 20s.
Mm.
And it's really like, that's the time where you're supposed to be your most robust, and everybody
Hmm.
around you is just like, you're
Hmm.
going 240 and loving life. And I had something hit me like in my early mid 30s. And so when I met you, it might have been right before or after my gallbladder surgery. And
Mm.
so it gave me like all of that built up with chronic illness for myself. But I couldn't believe that you had published a book and you're like so freely talking about it. And I was just like, but we're not supposed to, like, people think we're crazy.
Yeah. 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 I mean, there are still folks and generations a little bit older than us. Like I'm 51 and I have friends in their 60s and 70s and some 80s. And uh, like I was hanging out with someone the other day and we were talking over lunch, and she unfortunately has a cancer diagnosis, and she kind
Oh,
of leaned in and whispered cancer every
yeah.
time and looked around as though like someone would see her and
Taboo.
judge her. And I
Yeah.
wanted to just be like, please don't hide it. It's not, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just, you know, 1 in 2 people in the United States, it's the only country I know the stats for, but 1 in 2 people in the US lives with some kind of chronic illness. Literally half the people. And a third of
Mhm.
the people in the US has some kind of chronic pain condition at some point in their life.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you can't throw a stick in a room full of people and not hit a bunch of people. Please don't throw sticks. But you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're all around us. And what I
Uh-huh.
learned in my ChronicBabe work and in really like kind of shoving my creativity into it was that the weirder I got with it and the more vocal I got with it, the more people were coming out of the woodwork and saying, thank you so
Mhm.
much. I didn't know it was okay to talk about this stuff. I'm becoming a better self advocate. And like, yes, I'm winning. That's exactly, we're all winning. That's what I want.
Mhm.
It took me a few years to be my own best advocate. And then once I learned how to do it, I wanted to help other people do it
Mm.
because there's no reason to be quiet about this stuff. You know,
But
I'm
I'm
thinking
in the
now.
same age group as you, and
Mm-hmm.
I was raised with that boomer mentality
Yeah.
of parents where you
Uh-huh.
do not talk and display your dirty laundry out,
That's right.
and also in the workforce uh, that
Yep.
could go on your human resource record, and it is a stain. It is an indelible stain, and you will never
Yes.
be hired. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so you just,
Yeah.
it's like you just keep that right here, and you just don't.
Yeah. And
And
you know what?
that's.
If you want to paint within the lines your whole life, great. Go for it. Like that's not, I'm definitely not going to tell people they have to be a certain way. But
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you
Mm-hmm.
from my experience, and in my ChronicBabe years, all those years, I coached and taught tens of thousands of people, took
Mm-hmm.
workshops, came to lectures,
Yeah.
you know, emailed me, were part of membership, like you name it, tens of thousands of people.
Yeah.
And I have only ever had maybe like 2 or 3 people come to me and say, I hate your method. I don't like it. It's not working for me. Okay, fine. Then don't do it.
It's
Like I
not for
don't,
everyone. Yeah, I say,
it's not for
with
everyone.
my podcast too. I mean, I only one person commented, but it was like she rambles and whatever, and I'm like,
Yeah.
so and maybe I do, but this some people like it. If you don't, then move on to whatever other
Yeah.
podcast that
Feel free to
is
not
only
listen.
10 minutes long. There
Like,
you go.
yeah. You know, I'm thinking about, so like in recent years, almost 6 years ago to the day, in like a week and a half, is my 6 year soberversary that I'm 6 years
Hmm.
sober. And I also did not talk about that. I did not talk about it with anyone besides like my best friends and my recovery community for the first 2 years. And then I
Mm-hmm.
started talking about it. And I was so scared, Stephanie. I was like,
Mm.
I know people are going to not want to work with me. And, you know, the thing is, it's better to work with me now than it was when I was drinking every day.
Right? Yeah.
But, um, you know, the irony
Oh
there.
my
But
god.
I
Right,
started
right.
talking about it. I was at a conference, and it was a conference for people with chronic pain and doctors. It was a clinical and patient approach, which was pretty cool. And I was on a panel, and we were talking about vulnerability as a superpower, as a patient advocate. And I was like, I think this is the moment. And I'm going to
Mm,
say it in front of hundreds of my colleagues and a
yeah.
recorded, you know, thing that streamed out to who knows how many people. And I said, well, you know, well, one thing is that I'm sober and we talk about this and talking about sobriety and talking about opioid use and talking about this stuff and whatever. And um, I was like shaking on the inside. I was trying to project real confidence, but I was losing it on the inside. Like I thought I was going to hurl. I just was so
Oh,
afraid.
yeah.
But
Yeah. Because
after
it's
I
scary.
talked about it and the
Uh-huh.
panel was over, yeah, it was so scary. But so many people came up to me and thanked me for speaking
Mhm.
openly about sobriety. And from what we
Mhm.
know about sobriety statistics, there had to be many, many people in that room who don't drink,
Mhm.
you know? And if that means that they feel seen and represented, or
Mhm.
it helps them feel like they have permission to talk about it in their life, then I'm so happy because
Mhm.
shame thrives in silence and
Yes.
secrecy.
Yeah, you're right about
So
that for
yeah,
sure.
so I mean, I think it's better to talk about this stuff. I know lots of people disagree with me, but I think it's better.
Right. And then with wellness, I think that being a creative person, I know that I gravitate toward my crafts and hobbies for that um cathartic just
Mm,
feel,
mhm,
and to, just it calms me, relaxes me, and just gives me that stimulation. Whereas, some other people, it doesn't work for them. But so for
mhm,
you to, latch onto that and incorporate
mhm,
the creative aspect of that with wellness, goes hand in
mhm,
hand as well. And also, when you do one-on-one coaching with even like business owners in the creative industry,
mhm,
because then you've got people who do the whatever quilt pattern making or quilting or whatever for
mhm,
their business. Now their therapeutic thing
mhm.
has become a job. So then
Yes.
you got to deal with that side of it, of
Yeah, yeah,
just
I definitely
getting
have.
a balance,
Mhm.
and reinvigorating why they started that in the first place.
Oh, yeah,
So that was one of the questions. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say you hit the nail on the head. I mean, so
Hmm.
many creative business owners, whether you're selling sewing patterns or making products to sell, or maybe you run a retail establishment where you're selling um, creative materials for people to use in their own hobby or art practice. Those folks have taken something they love really deeply on a personal level and turned it into work. And I see nothing wrong with that. But one thing that often happens is they lose their own creative mojo.
Hmm.
And then it becomes a slog and they lose that therapeutic aspect of their own
Hmm.
making. And so
Yes.
often when I
Yeah.
work with clients like that, we focus on how do they bring creativity back into their everyday just for them so that not
Hmm.
everything is for work, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And I've even had to do some of that for myself, of things that is
Mm.
I do that's just for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it does help. And that's brought me to one of the questions I wanted to ask you today, because I know a lot of people that have creative hobbies, but whether they do or do not work in the field, how do we find the time to be creative? We want to do it, we want to do the thing, but
Mm-hmm.
then we just worked all day. We're depleted of time and
Yeah.
energy.
Mm-hmm.
How do we find it and to do it and enjoy it, and not say like, oh, I wish I could do that, but I'm so bit too busy, and uh, you
Mm-hmm.
know it's like just like the hamster wheel with that.
Oh, yeah. So when I'm working with a client and they feel too busy to do their own creative work, I start by asking them to do an evaluation of their day to day life. And this can be quite tedious to do for a few days, but to keep a log of a moment to moment log of how you're spending your day can be very revealing, you know? So you might notice, for example, that you move kind of slow in the mornings and you like to kind of, well, like, let me think of a client without giving any details because client privacy is so important to me and part of the ethics of the work I do. But
Mm.
um, at, let's think of someone who loves to sit with the newspaper for an hour at the beginning of the day. There's
Well, you
absolutely
could just talk about
wrong.
me, because I am not a morning person,
Okay.
and I need my coffee, and it
Okay.
takes me about an hour to just, it's like my ritual routine. It's like what I
Okay.
have to do. And if it's not done that way, and let's say, like, I've got this early whatever doctor appointment or whatever, and I got to get up at like 6 or 5:30 and
Yeah.
everything's in a rush. The rest of my day is just kind of like, ugh.
Frazzled.
But go ahead.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Well, yeah. Okay. So, I mean, if you want, we could talk about you specifically. We could lean into that
Sure.
if you
Why
want
not? Because then you're not
to.
violating.
Well, so I wouldn't ever want to tell you that your ritual is wrong. You know, I wouldn't want to tell you like you got to speed up or whatever because that's not my place. If you were a client, I would ask you, you know, is there a part of that ritual that is not serving you anymore?
Good
And
question. Mm, no, I'm good with that ritual.
yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So then we think sometimes with clients I ask them that question and they
Okay,
realize,
here's
so
one
for
thing
this
though.
one,
Maybe I extend it sometimes. So that
oh
might
yeah.
be putting like
Okay.
a, a cap on it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, so when you extend it, what are you getting out of that extension?
I am getting, I can tell you right away because I know what I'm doing. I'm procrastinating getting started on my day. I don't
Okay.
want to do
Yes.
it. And usually that's on a Monday and it really starts on Sunday night. I do not like Sunday evenings. And I do that thing
Oh.
where I try to stretch the day and I stay up late
Oh.
and then can't
Okay.
get up. I'm like not, enough
Okay.
sleep. And then it's procrastinating the day. So there
Okay.
you go.
Okay.
That's the only time
Yeah.
when it
So
doesn't serve me, when I do stuff like that.
okay. Yeah. So I hear that. So then, if we were coaching, I might then ask you, you know, what brings you to extend that Sunday night, or what is it that you don't love about Sundays? And you might offer an answer, and then we might think about. Sometimes it's a perspective shift. Like if it's a belief that you have about Sundays, well, you tell me, what's your belief about Sundays for you that makes you want to draw the day out?
Um, the day is okay. It's the evenings. It hits me in the evenings when it's
Mm,
like you got to start changing your mindset for the
mm-hmm,
week.
mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, I don't want to face it yet. But
Yeah.
because Sunday, all right. So growing up, it's like Sunday was also the day of rest.
Yeah.
So you feel good with it and stuff. And then you're like, oh, I don't want to. It's not like that every time, but I think it's
Right.
when I know I have a lot going on during the week and I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through all this? Let's
Yeah.
say I've just overbooked or I'm just too, or I have this deadline or something like that. That's usually when I'm starting to really feel it. It's like when it's
Yeah.
like in crunch time. And
I
then
hear you.
yeah, so then I feel guilty and that because I'm trying to avoid it all and maybe if I had put a little bit more prep time maybe ahead of time, but no,
Mm,
I try to like bury that until it's absolutely necessary for me to deal with it. So I'll pull out my knitting and just
mm-hmm.
try
Mm-hmm.
to ignore it.
So there's like a lot
Anyway,
going on there. Like one thing is maybe you're
yeah.
packing your week too full and then it feels
Yeah.
overwhelming. So then the question is,
Mhm.
are there things during the week that I can remove so that I don't feel it's called revenge procrastination. Have
Yes.
you heard this
I
term before?
I have heard it just in the last year, and I'm just
Yeah, so it's
like,
kind of a newer term
it
in
sounds a little like
psychological.
me.
Yeah, I listen, I've never done that. For anybody who's only listening, you can't see my smirk. So revenge procrastination is this vibe. Like for me, it's the teenager in me. She's like pissy because it's Sunday night and she doesn't want to go to school tomorrow. So
Mhm.
it's almost like I'm seeking my revenge on the week by staying
Yeah.
up late and doing what I want to do. But when I'm doing that, I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot because then I'm super tired Monday morning. And then Monday
Mhm.
morning at school kind of drags. I don't pay good attention. I don't take good notes. Then I struggle on my homework. Like it
Yeah,
can
it's a
pile
domino
up.
effect. Yeah.
Yeah. So like for some folks, when that kind of thing is happening, that kind of procrastination, sometimes it means making that Sunday feel more intentional and more delicious and more comforting and more fun, but packing it into a shorter amount of time. And
Hmm.
then saying, I'm going to say at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, I'm putting the devices away. I'm going to set a 30-minute timer. I'm going to light a candle or whatever you want to do to start setting the
Hmm.
mood. And that's when I encourage people to consider trying to go to bed early
Hmm.
so that they
Yeah.
feel ready the next morning to jump into the week. I
Yeah.
know that's not always possible. Like I have my
Hmm.
best friend's a single mom of two, like she works full
Hmm.
time. I mean, that's just like not possible for her, right?
Hmm.
But that revenge procrastination is that little kid in us that just like doesn't want to do the things that aren't as much fun.
Hmm.
And but then they
Yeah.
make teenage kid choices which don't serve us.
I think
But
it
then
runs
the
in our
other
family too, because my brother just visited. We had dinner with us, and he was talking about how he plans down to the minute minute and second of the time that's going to
oh
take him to get ready. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I do the same thing.
oh
I
okay
know how long it's going to take me to get ready, and then I
yeah
can like either whatever. It's like, in other
yeah
words, we
yeah
don't
yeah
pad time in there for just like real,
sure
just like breathing in between. It's just like wait, 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 wait,
yeah.
go.
So, yeah, so like I get that and I can be that way too, especially during work days. But for me, I'll just speak for me. What happens when I do that is I don't get enough downtime and then I feel kind of panicky and
Yeah.
intense. And then I
Mm-hmm.
bring that intensity and anxiety to everything I'm doing. And then everything feels like a potential failure. And wow, that
Mm,
those are shitty days. Like that does not feel good.
mm-mm. You're right.
So a thing I've
Yeah.
learned is that I have to intentionally build in more breaks. I need more breathing room. Like I
Mm-hmm.
can't schedule clients back to back. I need breathing
Mm-hmm.
room. And
Yeah.
maybe I only need 5 minutes and then I can do some other administrative task in between client sessions or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I want that option. And that's where I think the revenge procrastination is against this feeling of I don't have options. Like this is set for me. I don't have agency. Like if you think back to being a teenager, I didn't have a choice. You go to school Monday morning. That's you, there's a time you got to be there. That's it. End of
Mm-hmm.
discussion. But as adults and like for you and me as entrepreneurs, we have agency, we have choices. And so
Mm-hmm.
giving ourselves more space to relax, to rest, to do some hand sewing or knitting or whatever, take
Mm-hmm.
little breaks throughout the day, actually fuels us to feel more ready to tackle the harder things. So it's
Mm-hmm.
what's the word I'm thinking of? It's kind of paradoxical in a sense. We live in this very like capitalist, late stage capitalist society where our focus is on productivity. And so I struggle with this a lot. I have to push back against it all the time. Like
Mm-hmm.
my calendar should be full all the time. I should always be
Yes.
working. If I'm not
Mm-hmm.
working, I'm lazy.
Yes.
And
Yes.
right? And the
Yep.
thing is
That
that's
was my
bullshit.
next question. How do we assuage feelings of guilt for spending time on
Yes.
creative crafts and hobbies? So a lot
Yes.
of
Yes.
people will push away their hobbies because they feel the guilt. They feel the mom
Yeah.
guilt,
Yeah.
or work guilt, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I don't deserve to spend time on sewing.
Yes. Oh, yes. I would say that most of my clients come to me with that challenge.
Mm,
And so often it's about rethinking our perspective on our place in our culture. Our place as a woman or a man or whatever your gender is, a place as a parent or not parent, as a working person, entrepreneur, whatever. Rethinking our perspective on that. So, um, I come from like a more like I was a journalist and we work all the time. And then I worked in an association and we work all the time. And like, you're not worthy if you're not hustling all the time. And then when I
mm-hmm,
started my company, I hustled all the time. Some days I would call 20 people cold call to try to get new clients. I mean, I just
mm-hmm,
hustle, hustle, hustle. There's not anything inherently wrong with that, but we're human beings. We're not robots. And so we
yeah,
need rest and we need creativity and we need downtime. And so it's a shift in perspective of thinking of creativity not as just this like fluffy hobby thing, but as a
Mhm.
way that we take care of ourselves. The same way we
Mm.
drink water and take our medicine and get a checkup and exercise, all those things, creativity is part of that. It's, to come back to what we talked about at the beginning, as kids, we're born with this inherent creativity, this creative impulse to just get weird and experiment and try things and investigate. And we don't want to lose that. As adults, it
Mhm.
kind of gets squished out of us. We have to
Yeah.
fight to kind of get it back. And
Mhm.
so that revenge procrastination is like that kid part of you that's like pissed off. Like, I don't get to have fun. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to stretch out my Sunday and squeeze in as much fun time.
Mhm.
If we can try to find ways throughout the day to squeeze in more of that, then it doesn't feel
Mm.
as urgent to do you know what I mean?
Right.
Does that
Yep.
make sense?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I have clients I was thinking about this one client who would spend an hour every morning reading the newspaper. And the thing is, she would read the newspaper, it would get her all worked up and stressed out about a world things that she has no control over.
Mm. Mhm.
And so not only was she spending that hour, and as a journalist, this is painful to say, but I'm going to say we investigated the idea of not reading the newspaper every day because it was an hour of time. And then all she did was feel stressed out and out of control.
Mhm.
And so then she carried that energy into her whole day.
Mm.
And it's like sometimes you got to look at the things in your routine and ask yourself, how's this serving me? Is there anything here that I can get rid of so I can put in more creative time?
Mm.
Like,
Mhm.
here's a really simple thing. I don't wash my hair every day.
Mm.
It
Me
takes an
neither.
extra 20 minutes to wash my hair and style it. And
Mm.
I like that 20 minutes back. So I wash my hair like twice a week and I
Well, and
have it
for
cut really
some
short.
people, it's not health. It's not good to wash your hair every day because it strips your hair of oils. Unless you have
Absolutely.
greasy
So,
hair,
like,
that's it.
yeah, totally. So like there's little things like that in our day that if so
Mhm.
to come back to this idea of time tracking, it's not sexy, it's not really fun. People
Mm.
only need to do it for a couple days and they will see a pattern. They will
Mm.
notice
Mhm.
places. They'll be like, I actually thought that I was only sitting down to watch a 25-minute TV episode and actually I watched 4 of them. And it's like, okay, there's nothing inherently wrong with that because I binge TV too. But if you want to grow your creative practice, then maybe you want to scale it back and say, I'm going to watch 1 episode a day. And then the rest of the time, I'm going to
Mhm.
create or
Mhm.
whatever. But we
Mm.
have to get honest with ourselves about how we're spending our time
Mm.
and looking
Mhm.
at where we can recapture some fun creative energy.
Right. Right. Yeah. Good. And I recently spoke with a creative business owner who sews. She sews
Mm,
clothing. She has a family with a couple small children and a growing
mm,
business of her own. Yet,
mm-hmm.
she carves out time to sew for herself on a regular, guilt-free
Yeah.
basis.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
she fully enjoys it. And I took a lot away from that conversation. And I mean, I actually even got a little emotional about it because I'm like, it's
Mm.
very rare to speak to someone who is so confident about
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And I mean, literally, no, I sew for myself, guilt
Oh,
free. And,
love it.
she lives in another country, a different culture. And I said, wow,
Yes.
and this is my opinion, but it is so American to just like have that guilt of
Oh, yeah.
just always you
That,
have to be produce, and social media has even
yeah.
heightened that.
Oof.
And
Yes.
but I just was
That,
like taken aback by her.
yeah.
Just she was chill, she was confident in
Yeah.
herself, and was enjoying life and her
Mhm.
family and her business. you know
Mhm.
had the balance. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So
I
what
did.
that tells me, I mean, you touched on it. It is a uniquely American thing to be like,
Hmm.
if I'm not producing, who am I? What's my worth? And we look at some of these other countries where they have like 2 months or a month of vacation or 2 months of vacation and have all this flexibility and childcare at
Hmm.
work and all these other things designed to help them be a fuller, more satisfied, joyful human being. And
Hmm.
it doesn't their productivity, air quotes, does not falter because of that. In fact, we often are better creatively. So imagine this. Imagine I'm a wellness coach for creative people. I'm here like talking with clients about how to shape their creative practice. Imagine if I wasn't doing my own creative work for myself. Like
Mm,
I wouldn't have even the knowledge to draw on to guide my clients because I wouldn't be
mm,
doing my own work. And I wouldn't
mhm.
be a satisfied, happy person. And then I'm just not
Right.
going to be fun to be around.
Mhm.
So, like when I work with clients that are particularly still stuck in the productivity mode, I then talk to them about how could they use their own creative practice as a way to generate work. And what I mean
Mm,
by that is like sometimes I'll look at experiences I have when I'm doing my quilting and I will think, oh, there's a lesson in here that I can use with my clients. And
mm,
so sometimes if we look at our own creative work, we can pull lessons from it to use in our paid work. I'm
mhm.
not saying commodify every hobby or your craft or your art, but
Mm-mm.
if you're really feeling like, oof, I feel so much guilt, one way to baby step into it is just think about what is this practice that I'm doing for me, teaching me that I can then share with my clients. Like for your design work, if you're
Mhm,
designing something for yourself, if you're working on something for your home, is there a lesson here that I can impart to my clients? Or is there a
mhm.
story here that is great for the podcast? Like we can look for inspiration and bring it to other people. But truly, I love when
Right.
people just say, I was just making a thing and it was for me and that's all. Because we deserve to be able to do that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And it even goes to like the you have to take care of yourself in order to care for others.
Oh yeah.
Uh and the other thing is it's a very popular thing to say, and people are doing, of just take 15 minutes and do part of your project.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
if you do it, um you'll have a completed project, sooner than later. And
Yeah.
and some people think of that and they're super busy and they're just like, oh, I just can't even. 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem productive, or it doesn't seem like, but
Mhm.
if you try it,
Yeah.
because then I did try it, because even like Krista Watson even said, like with machine quilting, she's like, just take 10 minutes to practice,
Mhm.
and you know you'll see
Yeah, it's so true.
improvement before you know it. And
Mhm.
maybe you do have more than 15 minutes time, and then you end up saying
Mhm.
30 minutes,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah. And then you're that much more um relaxed and fulfilled
Yeah.
with just that small
For
amount of
sure.
time.
Yeah, that is
So,
so true. That's so true.
because I
Like I'm
used to
doing a
be
hand.
one of those. I used to be like, it takes me 15 minutes to pull a project out. What's that going to
Right. And so, like, if you were
do?
my client, I'd say, okay, how do we keep your projects accessible so it doesn't take 15 minutes to pull it out? You know what I
Exactly.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'd say,
Yeah.
okay, do you need a reorg of your sewing room or do you need a different storage capacity or what, do you need a project management system so you know where everything is? Like, we would talk
Hmm.
that through. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I'm doing a hand sewing project right now that I started after my recent foot surgery and I couldn't get off the couch really. Um,
Uh,
and I couldn't walk, couldn't sew on the machine, couldn't really do much of anything, but I could cut out with scissors little tiny drunkard's path blocks and hand stitch them.
hmm.
And over the course of a few weeks, I made like 150 of them because
Wow.
I just sat and I kept it. It's all in a little box with a
Hmm.
handle. So I could take it to doctor's appointments. I
Mm,
could sit in the car with it when we went somewhere. I could keep it at my desk. Like if I wanted to, I could be sewing it right now while we record this. Like
mm-hmm.
I made it handy and portable.
Yep.
And it only takes like 2 minutes to stitch up one of these blocks if everything's cut out. So it's
Hmm.
like we can it asks us to just shift our mindset a little bit and think about
Right.
opportunities rather than
Mhm.
this is like taking away from my
Yeah.
productivity, you know?
Right.
Um,
And also to and place an importance to it as well. It's not frivolous. It's
mhm.
not, so
Mm-mm.
and
No.
I started carving out time for myself in the evenings, probably in the last
Mm,
couple years only. And I
mhm,
can't tell you how much better that has been for me and how much more stuff I've been able to do.
mhm,
And now like I can't even like sit in the evenings just
mm,
watching a television
mhm,
screen if I'm
mhm.
not doing something with my hands.
Yeah,
Uh,
and you know what, Stephanie, that we know more now than we did even than a few years ago about the mind-body benefits of repetitive hand crafting.
mm,
One of the things we understand now that's pretty new, I don't know if you've heard of or your listeners have heard of EMDR. It
mm,
stands for eye movement desensitization. I always forget what the R is, but EMDR is it's a technique used in trauma therapy. So now
oh,
I did trauma therapy a few years ago, and so I'm understand it. Well, I'm familiar with it. Scientists do not exactly understand why it works, but
oh,
there is a thing that happens in our brains when we do bilateral work or an EMDR, like a therapist might take their finger and move it back and forth in a rhythmic way across your sight line. Some people
mm,
have light boxes where the light goes back and forth. When
mhm,
we're handcrafting with our hands, knitting, crocheting, sewing, whatever, we're doing bilateral, for the most part, people who have two hands to do the work are doing bilateral movement.
mm.
And that soothes something in our central nervous system that calms us down and takes us to a safe place. For those who are just listening, I'm moving my hands back and
Oh,
forth as
she's
I
moving
say
her hands
this.
back and forth. Yes.
And we don't know exactly why it works, but we know that it works.
Huh. That is very interesting.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if we want to ask ourselves, what's the key benefit of this? We can say mind body wellness. We can say that it is soothing to our central nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you're a singer, when you sing, you are moving your airways and opening and filling and relaxing your lungs and your diaphragm. You are soothing your central nervous system through this
Mm.
repetitive, deeper breathing.
Mm-hmm.
You're calming your body, you know? There's
So that's
lots of ways that
interesting. Yeah, because everything you're saying there is actually, it requires you to move your body in some sort of way, and not
Mhm.
just sitting and staring at a screen. And
That's
a
right.
lot of us stare at a screen for work. So
Yes.
I, I, I feel like, it does like, that's why I always say too that, these hobbies and handcrafts are still going to be around, even if we turn into total Jetsons, flying cars in the air.
Yeah. Right. Right.
There's still a need for tactile things
Yeah.
and to create with your hands. And like you said, with the
Absolutely.
singing, with your diaphragm, I mean,
Mhm.
so your body and mind, like you said, that association, I really truly
Mhm.
believe that for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really cool to see. I mean, people are studying the craft and art world more and seeing more and more benefits. And like when I went through trauma therapy a few years ago, my therapist wasn't like, think harder about this and you'll figure it out, like work harder on this and you'll figure it out. What she said was, close your eyes. I'm going to put on some music and we're going to dance, and we moved our bodies and then she
Mm.
prompted me and asked me questions, and then I got really emotional and I danced through it, and there was a release,
Mm.
and I was using my whole self, my mental and physical and spiritual self. And
Mm.
when we're crafting, when we're making things, that's what we're doing. And so we're healing ourselves. And
Yeah.
I I think there's a lot of history of women in particular and sewing in particular as being quote unquote women's work and being less
Mm-hmm.
worthy and totally unpaid. And we bring that centuries of history of misogyny
Yeah.
with us into our craft today. And so I meet so many women in particular, and some non-binary folks who will say to me, I just feels frivolous. I can't find the utility in it. And that is an old way of thinking that disregards and disrespects the immense craft and genius and art
Mhm.
of women and what they make. And so, even just as a feminist, I reject that. And I
Mhm.
say, without those things, you wouldn't have quilts to sleep under, you wouldn't have clothes to wear on your body, you wouldn't
Mhm.
have, there's so many things that we wouldn't have as a culture without that quote unquote frivolous women's work.
Well,
And so,
even that extends to the kitchen as well. So you
oh,
wouldn't
yeah.
be eating delicious foods.
Hmm.
But I also think that centuries is like from America
Oh,
specifically.
yeah.
Again,
Oh,
my
yeah.
opinion, but because in Europe, tailors were men. And so it was chauvinistic
Right.
that way, where a woman couldn't become a
Right.
tailor. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So again, it's
Hmm.
that uh,
Yeah.
misogyny, what you call it,
Yeah.
and a lot of the arts and crafts with just um,
Hmm.
throughout the years was taken seriously and compensated um,
Hmm.
for to men. Really, I mean,
Yeah.
like car- carpentry, blacksmithing, all of those
Hmm.
hand arts.
Hmm. And then to add one more layer, not to go too far off the path, but
I know.
when we look when we look at the fine art world,
Hmm.
for almost the history of the fine art world in North America and in Europe, the focus has been on, like painting, drawing, sculpture.
Yes.
Things like textiles were not considered to be art.
Hmm.
And that is primarily because they were quote unquote women's work and they were not
Hmm.
worthy.
Hmm.
And we know that there's exceptional brilliance and genius involved in complex quilt making. You can look at the art of Bisa Butler, for example. I
Yes.
went to her exhibit at
Me
the Art
too.
Institute of Chicago.
Amazing.
Incredible genius. Like,
Yeah.
it made me weep. It was overwhelmingly I
Yeah.
complex and beautiful and
Hmm.
heartful and amazing.
Hmm.
Um, and so wonderful to see an institution like that recognize her art, not
Hmm.
only as a woman, but as a Black woman, and to put it face forward and say, this is really important. We're giving it a giant exhibition space. Um, but that's new in the art world. That's a really recent shift to see textile
Yeah.
art highlighted like that. And so
Hmm.
again, we're pushing against many cultural forces that tell us that handicraft, I'll use that word because it's a little bit like it kind of has a stigma to it when we say
Yeah.
handicraft. But
Yeah.
to that, quilt making is my medium and people consider it a handicraft. It is an art form. And
Hmm.
but for me to prioritize it and to feel like it's worth spending a lot of time on, I have to change my perspective on it.
Mm.
And then the culture will change. Just the same way
Yeah.
as I had to change my perspective on having chronic illness and how I was going to be with it and talking about it and advocating. And then the culture has started to catch up with me.
Hmm.
So I think it's like a radical act to prioritize our creativity, to
Hmm.
push it forward on like many levels.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now. Just,
No, I totally agree and have just encountered thoughts of that. And also, like, I went to that Bisa Butler as well because it was in Chicago for some time. But and then that extends towards people who um, do their crafts, like making quilts or sewing clothing, and
Mhm.
people who are not part of our creative world don't see the value in it. And
Mhm.
when they are gifted things that are handmade
Oh
and
yeah.
they do not, they're like homemade, or they're embarrassed by it, or they like stuff it in a closet or
Yeah.
whatever, trash. I mean, it's hurtful. It really, very
Yeah.
much is so. But then, they go off of your handmade list. You know what I mean? It's just like,
That's right.
that's just all there is to it. But for
Yes.
what you're saying is it's starting to shift, and people are
Mhm.
starting to see outside of our world, they are starting to see
Yeah.
the value,
Right.
the craftsmanship, um,
Mhm.
of the art and the hobby.
Yeah.
It's not just that, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's more than that.
Yeah. I mean, I
So
really do. For some creatives, like Bisa, I think is a great, I mean, the genius. Like when I
mhm.
think people talk about Picasso and his genius, I look at her work and I
Well,
see genius,
yeah,
you
and
know?
Luke Haynes, he astounds me with his
Hmm.
quilts, and
Mm.
his work gets put on in museums too all the time.
Hmm. Hmm.
But and Heidi Parks. So
Yeah, her work is
there's
really exceptional.
yeah,
Yeah.
really, very much
Yeah, and if
so.
you go to QuiltCon and go look at modern quilting, there are people doing
Hmm.
things with math that just, I mean, I
Hmm.
continually needed a math tutor just to barely pass to get through high school. It just wasn't it was not, it didn't work for me. But, you know, you see people doing these things that are so complex geometrically
Libs
that,
Elliott, right?
yeah. So,
Yeah. I was able to take one of her workshops here through the Quilt Guild
oh yeah.
several years ago. It was so much fun. And
Mm,
for someone who has that vision of all the zeros and ones and she's got that mind,
mhm,
um,
mhm.
she the workshop was crazy. It wasn't what you thought. Um, it was it was very open and um, improvisational,
Yeah.
yet with some dictations of like a number or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah,
It was
some
so
constraint,
cool.
some kind
Yeah,
of
some constraints. Yeah.
mhm,
Yeah, and then
yeah,
what came out of it was one of a kind and it looked really
yeah,
cool and yeah,
and we
I
would
love it.
never look at Libs Elliot and say her, "Oh, she's being frivolous." You know
No,
what I mean?
we would
We would
never.
never do that. So, it's like, I want all of us, I want everyone listening to think about that and think about if how do you think about your favorite artist in your medium and give yourself the same respect, you know? Give
Hmm.
yourself that same like awestruck because whatever it is you're making is
Hmm.
incredible. And
Yes.
there are lots of people who will look at the simplest quilt I make and be like, I don't know how you did that. That's amazing. And I'm thinking it's just straight lines. Like it's no big deal.
It
But
is amazing. I've
but
seen
it
that quilt in person and it is like and it's amazing to us who know how it was made, like quilted. So imagine people
yeah.
who don't and they're looking at it and then it's just like their mind is
Yeah.
blown. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
if we can embody that feeling when we're thinking about our own creative work, wow,
Mhm.
we're like on the path
Yeah.
to culture change when we're doing that for ourselves. So,
Yeah, I agree. Well,
mm.
before we go, I want to talk about the many resources you have on your website, your online courses. You have a membership. So go ahead and let us have it.
Sure. Thank you so much. Well, so I offer a variety of ways to work with me. So I have one-to-one coaching where people work with me in, you know, hour-long sessions and we do a deep dive on how we can help them feel better and more confident in their creative work in their body and their mind. And then I have multiple on-demand courses, one about it's called the Daily Creative, which is just about how to imbue your everyday life with creative energy, which is really in line with what we were talking about today.
Mhm.
Like how to feel creative about folding laundry is where we
Yeah.
go. Like, and we make the mundane really fun.
Mm.
Um, and I have a membership. Now, the membership has been temporarily paused because I've been retooling it, but I am launching it again in May. So if you go to my
Ah,
website,
fun.
there's a place you can sign up and get an alert because that is going to reopen again in May.
Mhm.
And that is a very low cost. It's just $10 a month membership. Um, but in the new iteration of it, we'll have an online community and little challenges and guest speakers and all kinds of stuff. So, and then quilt guilds hire me to give talks and lectures. I'm starting to book actually talks and like lectures at corporations. And I'm
Mm.
talking with a hospital right now about how
Nice.
giving lectures about creative energy and self care and how people can do that for themselves. So there's lots of different ways to work with me.
Mhm.
And then I'm all over social media and I have a free newsletter. So you don't have to pay a penny to get some Jenni fun. You get
That's
to
right.
I try to make it accessible. So there's lots of options for people.
Yeah, and you're very generous.
Oh,
With
thanks.
and I do gravitate towards people who are like that. They're generous
Yeah.
with their
We
experience and knowledge, and you want to share with others, which is
Yeah. You
awesome.
know, I feel the same way about you. I mean, anybody who does a podcast and puts this kind of energy and excitement and research and administration, which I know there's a lot of it, like that's a passion and you're bringing that forward to people. So we're in a mutual admiration society, Stephanie.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you so much. So the links to your website and Instagram will be in the show notes. And yeah, just and Jenni doesn't even mind if you just, pop on her Instagram and say hi or
Yeah.
tell her that you,
I
listen to her on my podcast.
I, in fact, love it. It gives me so much joy. So people can
Mhm.
find me at coachjennigrover.com. It's Jenni with an I, or Coach Jenni Grover on Instagram. And I love it when people come say hi. I love when they send me little pictures of what they're working on.
Mm,
My DMs are open. I'm chatting with people all day about all kinds of stuff. It gives me immense joy. So I hope people
I
connect
love
with
it.
me
Me
there.
too. I'm always saying, just please say hi. I don't care, but I know people are
Yeah.
very shy because I'm one of them. Like I know what it is to like not, feel like
Yeah,
you can reach out, but you can even just to
for
do
sure.
the little do the little wave icon. Ah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time. And Coach
Thank
Jenni
you.
Grover, wellness coach. Yay.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Mwah.